Once again, I would like to welcome to my slide narration, and today we are going to narrate this particular issue, materials for teaching English. So we'll be looking only those issues which are related to teaching English language. So that's why our topic is materials for teaching English, issues you need to know. In this particular slide, I will be describing the major issues which you need to know in order to develop materials for teaching English language in an EFL or ESL culture. EFL, of course, you know that EFL for English as foreign language and ESL refers for English as second language. So that means if you are going to be a teacher or if you want to be a teacher, or those who wants to be a teacher, and before going to their classroom and teaching English, they definitely need some material. And this particular slide will give them an overall idea about developing and designing those materials which possibly or probably they are going to take to their classroom. And the information taken in this or used as a reference in this particular slides are from Brian Tomlinson, who is the editor of 2 books, and McDonald and Shaw and Mashura, and different other sources. And all these are organized by me, that is Mohammad Nasim Firdaus, and I consider this particular slide as this particular topic as a mother of the topics which are going to come in next few days, because if you understand these particular issues which we are going to discuss in this particular slides, then it will be very helpful for the topics which are coming in the next days to have a better idea about this course, which is methods and materials in teaching English. So let's start. This time we are going to have contents, and we will be looking specifically on those contents. So let's start with the contents. So here are our contents for this slide narration. First, we will be going through the material section. We will try to know by referring materials what do we understand, and then we will be trying to make a relation between materials and methodology, because I believe that you have already gone through the methodology section. Now you know the process and procedures considering different methodologies, but those methodologies are not some distant category which we are going to forget, but there is a very strong relation between materials and methodology, and we will try to look at that in that particular slide. And then we will go through material development and the material developers who are developing the material, and what are their roles and the needs. That means possibly you, and we'll see. And then we will be discussing about the feature of material development, and the slides will be ending by referring some common terms in material development. That means in this course, when you are going with the other topics, these terms, these basic terms will be needed for you. So first, what is a material? Material is anything, we are referring anything which can be used to facilitate the learning of a language. So definitely we are talking about English language, not any language, because as a part of this program, we are focusing mainly on English language. So anything which is used to facilitate the learning of a language, So we are referring learning. In physical classroom, I often have this question like that. In a regular classroom, the teachers use chalk and then blackboard or whiteboard and then marker and then and the duster and other things. So some students call me whenever I say anything, so can they be called as material? But the thing is that we are focusing on facilitating the learning. But the marker, the whiteboard or the blackboard or chalk, they are not facilitating the learning. Rather, they are being used as an aid for writing or showing different diagrams, or they are the media in some ways. But for example, if I want to teach you about descriptive essay or descriptive paragraph and I use a marker to give you the idea of that descriptive writing, then that particular marker will be considered as material. For example, I am using a marker and for learning, and I gave you the option about describing the marker, and you started to describe the marker by stating its section, its part, and its use. In that moment, or in that case, or in that context, that marker will be considered as material. So that's why we are saying anything which can be used to facilitate the learning. And whenever we are referring anything, we are referring in the form of a textbook, a workbook, a cassette, CD-ROM, a video, photocopy handout, a newspaper, a paragraph written on a whiteboard, and so on. There are many forms of material. So anything that can be used. And anything which presents or informs about the language being learned. So if your basic idea, your basic objective is to inform and give input of the target language. So if that objective comes true, then we can consider it as a material. The connection between materials and methodology. So materials and methodology, the connection between them. Look at this figure first, then we'll go with the text. Look at this figure, the framework of language teaching. This is the framework of language teaching, not the framework of material development. And this framework was developed by McDonough, Shaw, and Masuda. We can find that in the book. First, we will have the context, and then under context, we will have learners and educational setting. Educational setting considered will be the classroom and the learners who are going to learn the target language, and both of them will be going through the implementation of goals, and the goals is learning a language, and the goals will be forwarded by syllabus construction, and syllabus construction will be referred under materials, classroom methods, and which will be in lessons, tests, and other issues. So we cannot skip methodology in materials, or in other words, we cannot skip materials in methodology as well. We already know that under methodology we have a section which is concerned on the materials, on the learning materials, which materials we are going to use for our learners. So according to McDonough, Shaw, and Masuda, materials and methods cannot be seen in isolation, but are embedded within a broader professional context. So they are embedded, they are attached with a broader professional context. We cannot skip or separate these from one another. Both are together. So that's why we have this course. So the major objective of this course is that you will have the learning to develop a material, and then you will use that particular material in your classroom, and applying your method or methodology, your different methodology. You can use different methodology in your classroom based on your context. And in that methodology application, in the application of that methodology, you will use these materials. But in order to do that, you need to understand what is material, and of course you need to have better idea on developing a material. So if you know all of the things about materials and its development, then and only then, as a teacher or material developer, you will have better understanding from having the concept or having both the teachers and the learners. So material development is both a field of study and a practical undertaking. It does not say that just bring a newspaper or an article from a newspaper to your classroom and implement it in your classroom to teach English language, or by having that students will learn a language. It does not mean so. Material does not refer so. You need to develop your material, and that's why it is a field of study and a practical undertaking. Practical undertaking, and we are referring practical undertaking because it's a practical work. If you go to a classroom and you have to understand the context, you have to understand the needs of your learners, and by doing so you will be able to develop a good material for your learner. So that's why it is a practical undertaking. Tomlinson also refers anything which is done by writers, teachers, or learners to provide sources of language input, to exploit those sources in ways which maximize the likelihood of intake and to stimulate purposeful output. From different theories of second language acquisition, we know that language input and its importance. And we want to give or provide language input or the sources of language input by introducing materials. Those materials which are developed by writers or teachers, or maybe the learners, which suggest about the form or nature of material. So it can be done by any of them. Okay, here we have two categories of material developers. First one is professional material writers, and the next one is teachers. If we analyze professional material writers, they are very experienced and competent. That's why they produce systematic, well-designed, teacher-friendly books. But they can produce these. They can produce systematic, well-designed, teacher-friendly materials because they are familiar with the realities of publishing and potential of the new technologies. They can do that because they have that kind of experience. They know how to organize, they know how to design, they know from the teacher's perspective what should be integrated. But there is a but, because as they are very much focused on developing or writing the material, they lack energy and imagination, because they are focusing only some context, whereas the teachers, the regular teachers from the regular classroom, they have the interaction of different contexts. So that's why they have different imagination. They have different experience. So that thing is lack from the professional material writers, and sometimes insufficiently relevant and appealing to the actual learners, as they get less update about the actual learners. So sometimes it seems that it is not very much relevant and appealing to the actual learners, which is in fact more appealing and relevant if the teachers themselves design and produce those materials, because only need but of course there are some limitations, because whenever the teachers will be developing the materials, they will have this one, the experience, the competency, and the familiarities of publishing and familiarities of technologies as well. But Tomlinson believes that only need a little training, experience, and support. So if the teachers have the training, have the experience and support, then they will be, they can be. There is a possibility that the teachers can be a better material writer or designer, because they will have the imagination, they will have the energy, and they can relate the needs of the actual learners. There are real learners. So what should be the future material? Or if we want to look at the development of materials in future, what are the things we need to look at? Those future materials will be more personalized and more localized. Presently, if you just look at the books, if you look at the text, if you look at the materials, you'll be finding that most are from the foreign authors, and they lack localization, and they lack personalization, considering your context. So in future, you will have personalization and localization in the materials of English language teaching and learning, and they will have more flexibility and more creativity. They will have more respect to learners' intelligence, experience, and communicative competence. They'll be more focused on this one, and there will be more effectively engaging content. The contents will be more engaging. In different methods, we were focusing about the engagement of the learners. If the learners are if the learners can relate the tasks, the activities, is and engage themselves with the content, with the material, then they will be able to use the language and practice in the target language, which will be very helpful for learning the language as well. So that's why those feature materials will be more engaging. A greater emphasis on multicultural perspectives and awareness. This issue will come a lot in the future topics, because cultural issues are one of the are very much important, in the sense that it depends on different culture, and it varies as considering different culture. So that's why the materials will be varied as well, and experiential learning style preference, learning will be preferred in those materials, because the learners will be trying to learn by experiencing the situations, those contexts, and there will be more attempts on engage the learners in the language learning process as an experienced, intelligent, and interesting individual. So the learners will be considered as experienced, intelligent, and interesting individual, and considering that, the materials will be developed in order to engage. And more attempts made to use multidimensional approaches to language learning. Yes, multidimensional approaches. Already you know that the condition or the presence or existence of approaches. So so you know that different teacher will be liking different methods and approaches, or the alternative of methods, and for focusing on that, so there will be more attempts. And if that happens, then there will be more variety in developing materials as well, which we will be able to see in the future materials. So here are some common terms in material development. um, in a traditional classroom, I do this in 2 classes, but as you know, you will have a whole week, so it is okay with this, as all these terms, but I would like to assure that these terms are not so alien if you have gone through all the uh, classes I have been uploaded in this semester, or if you have studied well about language linguistics and ELT courses. So this will not uh, what should I say, this will not bother you a lot, but definitely you need to understand these. There are lots of terms in your book as well. I can give you the reference, or the reference is uploaded. So there are lots of terms, but I chose this one because in the next topics you will be having these issues, these terms. So if you don't understand this one, then you will face a lot of challenges in order to comprehend about those. So we'll have authentic task, authentic text, communicative competence, corpus, experiential learning, language use, language practice, coursebook, global coursebook, supplementary materials, learning styles, materials adaptation, materials evaluation, multimedia materials, new technologies, pedagogic tasks, text, workbook, world English. So let's start. So authentic task, a task which involves learners in using language in a way that replicates its use in the real world outside the language classroom. So in a language classroom, if you introduce such tasks which which replicates the real world task, for example, arguing a particular point of view or comparing various holiday brochures in order to decide where to go. For example, one of your friends wants to go Nepal, and another friend wants to go Indonesia, and you have collected different holiday brochures from different travel agencies. Now you are comparing those brochures and try to decide where should you go. So whenever you are doing that, you are comparing that, you need to have the language, you need to use that language which is a real world task, and by doing so you will have a task which is replicating real world, and those tasks will be referred as authentic tasks. And the same authentic text will be referred as the text which is not written or spoken for language teaching purposes. For example, uh, if you have grammar book, which is definitely for language teaching purpose, they are used to give you the input, grammatical input. That's why those books were created. But if you get a newspaper article, or get a rock song, uh, um, uh, maybe the lyrics of a rock song, you know that those lyrics of rock songs or the newspaper articles, they were not prepared for developing your language capacity or language ability, but to entertain. So those texts will be referred as authentic text. If that is referring to develop your language, the objective is to develop your language, then we will not consider them as authentic text. Communicative competence, we have gone through this. Communicative competence, uh, I would like to give a reminder that we need three primary competencies, and that is grammatical competence, social linguistic competence, and strategical competence. And if you develop those abilities to uh, abilities, then definitely you will be more competent in communication. Corpus, a bank of authentic text, that means where you will find lots of authentic text. Actually, the corpus is restricted to a particular type of language use. For example, if you have a book with lots of legal documents, then we'll consider that as a corpus of legal documents, because all those forms of writing will be pretty much similar. And then a corpus of newspaper, yes, the format of newspaper writing will be pretty much similar. And maybe if you want to look at about official papers, official documents, you will find that there are lots of similarities in there. So if you have uh, the similarities, or if you have a bulk number of similar text, then we'll consider it as corpus. If you want to go with the study of ELT and linguistics, sometimes you might need to study or need to have research on corpus. Corpus based research is very much familiar at this moment. Experiential learning, it is pretty simple. Whenever you will be learning by experiencing it. For example, whenever you are learning by reading a novel, you can understand some vocabularies and other things. So that means you have experienced, and and your learning will be considered as experiential learnings. The thing will be same whenever you will be listening to a song as well. Language use, activities which involve the production of language in order to communicate. So, uh, we are referring definitely, whenever we are referring as language use, we are referring definitely in a classroom context. So we are referring those activities which involve in the production of language in order to communicate. So if you produce some language in order to communicate, those will be referred as language use. For example, in the first class, so whenever someone will introduce, those will be a form of language use, and completing a story will be considered also uh, uh, one of the forms of language use. Then language practice. So there is a little bit of difference between language use and language practice. Whenever we are referring language practice, we are referring the repetition of similar language point or similar language skill in an environment. For example, you have done it. You have done it in your first class about your introduction. But if you repeat those introduction in other classes, then we will be referring as language practice. For example, the teacher wants you to more skilled about introducing yourself, and that's why he or she wants you to introduce yourself again in some other classes, then we will be referring those as language practice. So there could be some other activities as well which will have repeated uh, uh, introduction, and by having those repetition you will have more language practice. Course book, this is very much related with the material, because a textbook which provides the core material for a language learning course. For example, you know that for this particular course, I have given you one particular material, core material, and that core material, that means that textbook is considered as a course book. So that's why uh, definitely most of your teachers give you one course book where you will find most of the topics in there. So maybe if the teacher wants to teach grammar, so uh, a course book based on grammatical information, grammatical knowledge will be considered your core materials. Global course book. Yes, a global course book, it definitely is not written for learners from a particular culture or country, but it is written considering the similar needs and similar age group. For example, the book you have got for this particular course, those that particular book was not written for you, especially not for you, but for the age group and the need and the needs you are focusing on. And so whenever we are referring global coursebook, definitely it is not focusing any particular culture, but focusing on the age group and and uh, similar needs, prime needs, or limited needs. Supplementary materials, we know what is material, what is core book, but here whenever I can give you lots of examples of supplementary materials. For example, uh, um, you know that your course book covers a lot, but whenever you there are some limitations or you fail to understand some parts of it, then you need some other materials. So whenever the teacher introduce those materials, and those additional materials after core materials will be core materials, those additional materials after core materials will be referred as supplementary materials. So maybe maybe I most of the time I introduce the head of a book for uh, for a language course, but after that book I introduce some grammar books. Sometimes I introduce dictionaries. So in the time, dictionaries and those grammar books will be referred as supplementary materials. In this course as well, after textbook, the materials I gave you will be also referred as supplementary materials. Learning styles, uh, it is pretty much related with the second language acquisition. If you have gone through with second language acquisition, then you know that the learners are different, and so as their learning style. So as the learners are different and their learning styles are different as well, so by referring learning styles, we are referring the ways that particular learners prefer to learn. Some learners prefer to learn and through listening. Some learners want to visualize or want to see. Some learners want to analyze, or some learners want to have global or holistic or experiential or experience before learning. And some learners uh, learn whenever they involve or they use uh, their body or body for learning, or they have to move in order to learn. And we have materials adaptation. There will be a whole topic on material adaptation, but whenever we are referring adaptation, we are referring to adjust. Whenever we try to adjust with some consideration, because we want to change in the materials, because we want to improve them, or we want to adjust in a particular context for some particular learners. That's why we want to adapt. For example, I should tell you that as you have a global course book, so definitely I need to adapt in order to understand those, because you learners, that means my specific or particular learners, they're different than those material developers. uh, uh, I mean those the writer of the global course book, they do not have one particular context, one particular cultural context, but whenever I am referring those books in my language classroom, I have to adapt those materials considering my learners, my context, my culture. And then we will have material evaluation. So we are referring the systematic appraisal, that means systematic evaluation or judgment of the value of materials in relation to their objectives and to the objectives of the learners using them. So for example, you have English for today for class 9, and in that particular book you can evaluate. You can most of the time those evaluation come at the very uh, at the early stage of development, before going to the hands of the learners. So you need to examine, you need to judge whether those material would be suitable or not for the learners. So that's why you need to evaluate. You need to evaluate from internal or external, and external section as well, not or but and. So you need to have both internal and external section in order to evaluate a material. We also will have a complete topic on material evaluation. Multimedia materials refers whenever we use of materials which make use of a number of different media. In one media we have different medias as well. In one medium we have different media, like a CD-ROM which makes use of print, graphics, video, and sound. In computer we have a different section as well. So that's why we are referring as multimedia materials. These are comparatively new. If we consider about 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, then we are considering this one. New technologies. New technologies refers a term which used to refer to recently developed electronic means of delivering language learning materials or of facilitating electronic communication between learners. So we are referring at recently developed electronic means of delivering language learning materials or of facilitating electronic communication between learners. That means internet, emails, YouTube, chat rooms, blogs, Facebook, etc. are the new technologies because they are used in order to teach language learning. Then we'll have pedagogic task. Pedagogic task refer which does not replicate. Whenever we went through the authentic task, which is replicating real world tasks, but in pedagogic tasks, because pedagogic is mostly related with teaching, so pedagogic tasks will not replicate a real world task. So it will be the pedagogic tasks are designed in order to facilitate the learning of language or of skills as in a would be useful in a real world task. So then that those might be useful in a real world task, but those tasks that do not replicate a real world task. So definitely these pedagogic tasks you have found this pedagogic task in your language classrooms, fill in the blanks in a story or working out of meanings of 10 nonsense words. That means making sentences. So you have found it, and those tasks are referred as pedagogic tasks. And if we refer only the task, so we are referring the activities in which the learners are asked to use the target language in order to achieve a particular outcome within a particular context. So we have gone through the differences between task and activities, so uh, we'll not putting this forward, but whenever we are referring task, we are referring some specific outcome. Whenever we are having introducing some specific outcome for in a specific context, then we'll be referring those as tasks. For example, solving a problem or planning a meeting would be a task. So the teacher might ask you to plan a meeting, or as a teacher you might ask your learners to plan a meeting, and by doing so they will be doing a task. Text. So any text can be in written form or in an oral form as well. Maybe a recorded speech will be can be a form of text as well, or maybe one kind of passage or any form, a paragraph will be considered as a text, and those texts are the sample. So that's why any extended sample of a language presented to learners of that language. For example, you have a paragraph on maybe the traffic jam, and those that piece of paragraph is just a sample of it, of the target language. If that is written in English language, so we can say that that is a sample of English language. So a poem, a newspaper article, a passage about pollution, a song, a film, a live conversation, everything can be considered as text. Workbook. I know this particular workbook. You can see lots of workbook for the primary students, and maybe the students of class 1, 2, and 3. They have the book, and they need to write in the book as well. So we are referring workbook as a book which contains extra practice activities for learners to work on. So you learners will have extra practice in that book, and they will be doing those activities, and those books will be referred as workbook. You can find that in kindergarten or intermediate schools they introduce lots of workbook as the learners can and have practice whenever they return to their home. World Englishes is one form, or we can say a variety of English which is used for international communication. For example, every language has its lots of varieties, standard variety, and then local variety, regional variety, or in basic form we have diagnostic situation like age variety and L variety. But considering the spread of English language, we know that the different people use English in different situation, and there are lots of varieties and differences in there. So whenever we are referring those that particular variety which can understood by everyone all over the world, we are referring that particular variety as a world English, because that variety is used for international communication. So here are the references. We have two books which are edited by Tomlinson, and of course McDonough and Shaw, and other sources. Questions. If you have questions, of course you have forum to produce your questions in there, and definitely I will be joining. And of course you have the freedom to answer your peers as well. So thank you very much. I know there are lots of things you need to look at, you need to understand, but those are the primary terms. Those will be needed for the coming topics, upcoming topics. So uh, don't take those terms lightly. Those will be necessary. Uh, from my perspective, I would like to recommend you to have a section of those terms, and try to assimilate with the examples. I have given lots of examples in there, almost for every terms. So try to match the terms uh, with the examples. I believe it will be fine for you. And if you need anything more, please let me know in the forum. Thank you very much.